Up next, we have Mr. Oskar Gross. Oskar is the head of the Estonian Police and Border Guard Board Cybercrime Unit. That unit works in cooperation with its international partners to detect and investigate cyber crimes that have affected Estonian citizens and/or is in the Estonian jurisdiction. So take it away, Oskar.
Thank you very much. All right. So the opportunity to talk about this topic is pretty nice for me, and mainly because, although our main effort is put in finding and arresting cyber criminals, then sometimes it's pretty nice to take a step back. So when the topic was offered to me with a question, what has changed with the coronavirus situation, it was pretty interesting to think about it. And the problem what I kind of achieved, or where I got to in the end, was that, in my opinion, not too much has changed. First of all, because the computers are still operating the same way as they did before. Humans are still behaving pretty much the same way as they did before. What has changed is the environment, and how people now behave in this environment is the question, which has probably changed a little bit of the scenery which we've seen in the cybercrime world. And this is also inspiration for the title of the slide, which is that mass equals the volume times the density, meaning that quite often in cybercrime, in very many cases, pretty much the amounts of funds or the success of your operation depends on how big volume you can attack at one point, and then how successful you are, meaning that it's pretty much like a physical rule. So, and also what I think is interesting is that during the coronavirus situation, we see that some points are emphasized, and it is really nice to pinpoint out how kind of cybercrime actually is part of or is very similar to traditional crime, and this is which I will touch upon in a second. But if there is a question whether the crime itself has increased or cybercrime has increased, I think the answer for me would be most probably no. And I would imagine the reason why we feel that there have been more and more cyber criminal incidents with coronavirus is due to the reason that we have confirmation bias, and as we are affected by the social situation we're in, then we of course see everything that is kind of related to it. So I think my quite strong argument would be that cybercrime actually is not anything new, and I don't mean by anything new that it's only, I don't know, started in the late 80s, but what I'm rather thinking is that it is actually very traditional crime. If you start thinking about it, then ransomware is nothing more than a way of extortion, or if you think about a DDoS attack, then it's nothing more than intimidating someone, or also using this intimidation to extort, I don't know, some kind of funds or information or whatnot. If you think about intrusion to computer systems, it's just a mean to get access to information or to finances, or to use this as a tool for other sets of crimes. And of course, phishing is a classical social engineering technique. It's just a subset of the whole way how frauds have been working from very old ages. And of course, crime always has one part is how it's done, but on the other question is why it's done. And I think also the motives have stayed pretty much similar. For instance, financial gain is a classical one in cybercrime. Also seeking revenge, for instance, an ex-employee or ex-employer or ex-girlfriend, boyfriend, whatnot. Also sexual urges, feeling of power. These are all there. Maybe one of the motives which is a little bit more unique is intellectual curiosity, which is maybe more prevalent in cybercrime than in other forms of crime. But in general, we can still say that cybercrime actually looks very similar to different kinds of crime. It's just the tools that we are using that makes it a little bit mystical, maybe mystical. And this is also why quite often it seems that people feel that it's so kind of hard to understand, that they don't really think about that it's based on the very same simple principles. Just a second. And also one difference, I think, or two differences. One of the differences is that cybercrime is a little bit more influenced by the global socioeconomic differences. If you have local crime, then of course it's depending on the state itself. But as cybercrime is very global, this means that if we have big changes in different, if we have global changes, then of course it little bit changes the dynamic of cybercrime in general. Another interesting aspect is that you rarely, or actually cyber criminals almost never meet their victims, meaning that they don't have the emotional response to what the person feels. For instance, if you try to fraud somebody their last savings, it might be much harder for the person to do it in real life, but in cyber world you don't really understand that there might be even a person, because it seems to you that you're robbing a bank, for instance. Okay, and now to coronavirus. So I think the big question is coronavirus, or the whole situation in the world, is it like a opportunity, or is it like a big paradigm shift? And I would say that no, it's just essentially a very good opportunity that cyber criminals have used to an extent, because it just makes it easier to maximize your success rate. So it's quite often it is quite easy to increase volumes. You can choose more targets, you can do whatever, but it is really hard to change the success rates of your attack. So this is pretty much like if you make a very, very simple phishing email and you send it to people, then it's quite likely that the percentage stays the same, how many people fall for it. But now if you increase the volume, then you earn more. So in the coronavirus situation, of course, you can exploit it in a way, because you know that people most probably have some kind of additional, people are feeling in a specific way. Because if we think about exploits, then we can think about exploits as like computer hardware or whatever errors or ways you can exploit them. But also most probably the reason that as people in general are imperfect, then there are different ways we can exploit them by knowing how they behave. I think in the context of coronavirus, a good example is that if we have a shortage of masks and people want to buy masks and there are no masks, then if you have a fraud which provides you masks and says that these are certified masks, then of course people are, as they are afraid, then it's more likely that they fall for it. For instance, if during the COVID crisis the states are communicating actively to people, for instance sending emails, then this is again a good opportunity to, because as a criminal, most probably a criminal would think that, like, how can I exploit now the aspect that the state is communicating to people? The thing is, as state is something which people are trusting, then if I can simulate it, maybe more people click on the link. If people are working from home, then you understand that there are new tools that people haven't used before, so it's quite likely that you can actually exploit that. And if hospitals are in crisis mode, then of course, due to the urgency of the situation, if you have a ransomware attack, then it is more likely that the hospitals will pay the ransom rather than they have long meetings of 2 days and discuss what shall we do now. Should we take it from the backups or should we pay? What were the losses? But you have to react fast, just because in crisis mode you need to have the hospital running. And these are actually playing on the same things that traditional cybercrime is playing on. So I wouldn't say that it's the crime itself has increased, but it's rather that people who are working in this field, they felt that this might be a good opportunity to take advantage of. And the reason for this is that successful cyber criminals, or actually like in general, the whole everybody is successful when they adapt to situations. And if we look in the historical sense, when we were able to start taking fingerprints and comparing them, then criminals started using gloves. If we have economic crisis, then you have some kind of get-rich-now schemes. If we had first online banks, then of course there were phishing for credentials, trying to exploit that situation, or credit cards, which is actually kind of similar to checks, and so on. So usually if there is something new coming, then you try to find a way how to exploit it. And now it is not only about the techniques, but it's also, if people already know that it's very common to get phishing emails that there is somebody from some country offering you $3 million because they just have it sitting on their bank account. If people are too informed, then they don't click on the links anymore, meaning that you have to invent something new, meaning that if coronavirus is coming, then most probably it's just a great opportunity for the cyber criminals to take advantage of. But the modus operandi is still the same. And that's how I would conclude. Thank you very much. Questions?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. We will have, we do have questions. I do have questions. Question: as an analyst, I've seen that this coronavirus pandemic actually coincided with a little bit of a change in ransomware. And ransomware, of course, the big and prominent question there. With ransomware operations, where they're not only demanding ransom for unlocking the systems, but also threatening to post everything online, all the data online. Now, this kind of extortion is garnering more attention in the news because there's actually large corporations that are paying the ransoms. This makes the criminal operations even stronger. Is there a way to stop actually people from paying them, or is there a way to stop these ransomware gangs from getting more and more sophisticated and powerful?
I don't know about the paying. I mean, the problem, of course, is that if you're paying the ransom, then you are essentially funding criminals to attack more and more. Pardon, what was the second part of the question?
So is there a way of actually, how do we take down those big, like the bigger and bigger ransomware gangs?
Yeah, right. So we're working on the second part, but I mean, jokes aside, we can never take away the advancing sophistication of different criminals ever. And I think it actually goes very well with the slide that every time we have a forensic tool which will kind of counter something or give you away in a crime, then the criminals will find something which will most probably kind of overcome this one, and then you have to invent a new forensic tool. So this is an endless match, most probably. And that's how it is.
All right. Thank you very much, Oskar.
Thank you.